Saudi Arabia's Ras Tanura oil terminal, one of the largest oil export facilities on Earth, was hit in an Iranian strike. Qatar's Ras Laffan liquefied natural gas facility, which supplies a substantial portion of Europe's energy imports, was also targeted. Global stock markets went into freefall. Kuwait's exchange suspended all trading entirely. Saudi Arabia's Tadawul dropped nearly 1.5%. Qatar's benchmark fell close to 2%. And that was only day one. Energy analysts began running scenarios. If the strait remained disrupted for even a few weeks, the economic damage would be measured not in billions, but in trillions. Global inflation, which had only recently begun stabilizing, faced a violent reversal. Aviation simultaneously collapsed. Airspace over Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, and the UAE was closed or severely restricted. The disruption to international air travel was the most severe since the COVID-19 pandemic. Cargo and logistics networks, still recovering from years of earlier disruptions, were placed under maximum stress once again. Every dollar of this damage traces directly to one decision made in Washington on the night of February 27th. Here is the revelation this video promised at the opening. The United States did not lose control of the Middle East on the day the bombs dropped. It lost control in the days after, when its closest Arab partners began doing something they had never done publicly before. They began questioning Washington out loud. Qatar shot down 2 Iranian Sukhoi Su-24 jets that entered its airspace, the first time a Gulf nation had ever destroyed Iranian aircraft. That sounds like solidarity with the American mission. But simultaneously, Qatar's prime minister was on a call with the Iranian foreign minister, demanding an end to the attacks and calling publicly for a ceasefire. Qatar was intercepting Iranian jets with one hand and calling for peace talks with the other. That is not the behavior of a committed military partner. That is the behavior of a country desperately trying to exit a war it never agreed to enter. Saudi Arabia announced support for countries repelling Iranian strikes, but Saudi diplomats made clear that Riyadh had guaranteed Tehran it would not be used as a launching ground for any attack, and Iran struck it regardless. The kingdom was enraged at Tehran, but sources close to the Saudi government signaled deep discomfort with how Washington had handled this entire situation from the very beginning. NATO was pulled in when Turkish air defense systems intercepted an Iranian missile moving toward Turkish airspace, believed to be the first time NATO forces had ever engaged an Iranian missile heading toward a member state. Turkey had already publicly denied reports that its Konya airport was supporting American surveillance of Iran. Ankara was walking the thinnest diplomatic line imaginable. And Oman, the one Gulf country Iran had not struck, the quiet mediator that had hosted months of sensitive Iran-U.S. negotiations, watched everything unfold with public dismay. Oman's foreign minister stated directly that active and serious negotiations had once again been undermined. Oman had told the world just days before that peace was within reach. It was not. It had evaporated overnight. We are now on day 5 of the 2026 Iran war. Trump said the conflict would last 4 to 5 weeks. CENTCOM's stated mission is to completely dismantle the Iranian regime's security apparatus. The U.S. Navy has already sunk more than 20 Iranian ships. B-2 stealth bombers have struck Iranian ballistic missile facilities deep inside the country. Israel has launched over 1,200 munitions across 24 of Iran's 31 provinces. The Israeli Air Force shot down an Iranian jet in the first air-to-air combat engagement of the conflict. But Iran is still launching, every single day. Iranian ground forces have entered battlefield operations. Iranian naval assets have targeted American ships. Iranian missiles struck the U.S. Embassy compound in Riyadh. 6 American service members have been killed. Trump has vowed to avenge their deaths. The escalation ladder has no visible ceiling. And so the real question, the one that matters for every investor, every government, every person who pays an energy bill, is not whether this ends in 4 weeks. It is what the Middle East looks like on the other side of it. Because even after the shooting stops, the trust will be broken permanently. The Arab allies who hosted American bases, who anchored Washington's security architecture in the Gulf for 5 decades, now know that the United States is fully capable of launching a war of this scale. A war that puts their airports, their ports, their economies, and their citizens directly in harm's way. Without genuine consultation, without a guaranteed protection plan, and without an exit strategy that anyone can clearly describe. One defense expert told Breaking Defense that if Iranian strikes continue, the Gulf Arab states may feel compelled to begin participating in offensive counter-operations against Iran themselves, the UAE in particular, possibly Saudi Arabia, because sitting behind missile defense batteries and slowly depleting your interceptor stockpiles is not a sustainable strategy. It is a slow countdown. The moment a Gulf Arab nation fires back at Iran offensively, not in defense, but as an aggressor, the architecture of the Middle East changes in ways that cannot be undone. The United States may win this military operation. Iran's infrastructure may be severely degraded. A new Iranian government may emerge. All of that remains possible. But winning the war and fracturing the alliance are not mutually exclusive outcomes. Right now, Washington may be achieving both simultaneously. 150 tankers are sitting still in the Gulf, waiting. The world's economy is bleeding with every passing hour. And the Middle East, that will exist on the other side of this conflict, will look nothing like the one that existed before February 28th. Watch closely. This is far from over. The explosion came at 2:30 in the morning, not in a war zone, not in some remote desert compound, in the heart of Dubai, in the shadow of the Burj Al Arab, in a city where just 48 hours earlier, tourists were watching the sunrise over the Arabian Gulf. That was the moment the world changed. Because when missiles start falling on the most prosperous cities on Earth, when Dubai burns, when Doha shakes, when Riyadh wakes up to air raid sirens, it is no longer a regional conflict. It is something far bigger. And here is what nobody is telling you clearly. The United States did not just start a war with Iran. It may have shattered the most powerful Arab alliance it spent 50 years carefully building. And once that fractures, the consequences will not stay in the Gulf. They will reach your gas tank, your grocery bill, your investment portfolio, and the global economy itself. Stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what happened, why it happened, and what comes next. And what comes next is the part that should keep every world leader awake at night. To understand why Arab allies are now furious at Washington, go back to the morning of February 28, 2026. At 2:30 a.m. Eastern Time, President Trump posted an 8-minute video on Truth Social. No press conference, no address to Congress, no declaration of war, just a video. In it, he announced that the United States and Israel had already launched a coordinated joint military operation against Iran, codenamed Operation Epic Fury by the Americans and Operation Roaring Lion by the Israelis. The strikes hit Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, Karaj, and Kermanshah simultaneously. And the mission, as Trump stated without ambiguity, was not negotiation, not deterrence. It was regime change, the complete dismantling of the Iranian government. Within hours, the world confirmed that Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had been killed. And one of the most powerful figures in global geopolitics, gone. Several senior Iranian military commanders and officials were also dead. The scale of the operation was unlike anything the region had seen since the Iraq War. And just like the Iraq War, the justifications were already collapsing under scrutiny. The IAEA told CNN directly that Iran was not days or weeks away from a nuclear weapon. U.S. intelligence assessed that Iran would need until 2035 to develop an intercontinental ballistic missile. A Democrat senator walking out of a classified briefing said on camera that he had no idea what the actual objective was. But the strikes had already happened. Iran was about to respond, and it would do so in a way that nobody had fully anticipated. Here is where the story becomes genuinely complicated. Iran's military doctrine had always been transparent. If you strike us, we strike everything around you, every American base, every country that dares to host American forces on its soil. Tehran had said this publicly, repeatedly for years. Washington heard it. And Washington launched the strikes anyway. What followed was the largest simultaneous barrage of Iranian missiles and drones ever recorded. Hundreds of ballistic missiles, hundreds of unmanned aerial vehicles, all fired across 9 countries in a single coordinated wave. Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Iraq, Oman, and Israel. The Gulf Cooperation Council nations, countries that had spent a decade carefully positioning themselves as neutral, prosperous, globally connected economic powerhouses, suddenly found themselves on the front lines of a war they had explicitly, urgently, and repeatedly asked Washington never to start. Qatar had been mediating peace negotiations. Oman had been hosting quiet, sensitive diplomacy between Washington and Tehran for months. Saudi Arabia had been quietly rebuilding its relationship with Iran. These were not hostile actors. They were pragmatic neighbors, protecting their economies and their populations. And now Iranian missiles were falling on their airports, their ports, and their capital cities. The numbers were staggering. Kuwait's air defenses intercepted 97 ballistic missiles and 283 drones in a single engagement. Bahrain confirmed that the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters, one of America's most critical naval installations, was struck directly by an Iranian missile. Qatar reported being hit by 44 missiles and 8 drones on day one alone. Saudi Arabia confirmed strikes on Riyadh and the eastern province, which is precisely where the kingdom's most vital oil infrastructure is located. The UAE Ministry of Defense tracked 174 Iranian ballistic missiles, 689 drones, and 8 cruise missiles, all incoming. And critically, Iran did not only hit military installations. Iranian munitions struck Dubai International Airport, one of the world's busiest aviation hubs. They hit Jebel Ali Port, the most important commercial shipping facility in the entire Middle East. Debris fell on Palm Jumeirah. A fire broke out on the facade of the Burj Al Arab. A residential neighborhood near Abu Dhabi's Zayed International Airport was struck. Hotels in Bahrain and Dubai were damaged. These were not accidents. These were calculated signals. Iran was telling the Gulf states directly, your economic crown jewels are in our crosshairs. The reaction from Gulf leaders was immediate and furious. A joint statement from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Bahrain, and Kuwait condemned what they called Iran's indiscriminate and reckless attacks against sovereign territories. Saudi Arabia specifically noted it had already guaranteed Tehran that its airspace would never be used for strikes on Iran, and Iran had bombed it anyway. A veteran Arab diplomat speaking to NBC News was most direct of all. The Gulf countries have no choice. It was a huge mistake for Iran to strike the Arab neighbors. People are furious. But behind closed doors, those same diplomats were asking a more dangerous question. Not just why Iran did this, but why Washington put them in this position to begin with. Now we talk about money, because this is where the war stops being a Middle East story and becomes every person's story. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway, roughly 21 miles wide at its tightest point. Through it flows approximately 20% of all oil traded globally, 1/5 of the world's entire oil supply, every single day. Iran closed it. The moment that news broke, oil markets erupted. Prices spiked sharply. Insurance premiums for shipping vessels exploded overnight. 150 freight ships, including dozens of oil tankers, became stranded, unable to move in either direction. 2 tankers were struck directly in international waters near Oman.